Well, this week I am very excited, partially because Kirk doesn't know anything about our guest, Randy, today. And I intentionally didn't tell you, Kirk, about Randy really much because I want your reaction.
You did mention his name.
I did, yeah, but that's about it. So I want your reaction to some of these things. I'm excited to see where this conversation goes. But Randy Vance, we should start by saying the end result of everything we're about to talk about is you are a very successful owner of a mortgage company in Central Oregon and have a pretty rockin' life going. So let's start there. Things are good.
Things are good.
Awesome. I oftentimes, like, we start with some really difficult things and then it's like, well, what's the end result? I thought I'd start with the end. Things are good. But let's go back to the beginning. You and I, so we met, you know, kind of off and on in the industry, but when I first actually got to talk to you was in Philadelphia last year, and we got some really good connection time, and it occurred to me you and I walked a very similar path. So let's get into the part that was most fascinating to me. You were in a band.
Jones Road.
So start. You grew up in going to youth group, right? Like you were in similar to the two of us. Talk a little bit about that, you know, those formative years for you growing up the way you did.
So my grandpa was a Baptist minister, and my mom had prayed when she divorced my dad, she had prayed to send her a pastor's son, and that's exactly what she got. And so I basically grew up in the church. And then when we moved to Oregon, I got involved in the Royal Rangers.
Oh, yeah.
So that was, I was a Royal Ranger, which is like the First Assembly of God version of the Boy Scouts. And one thing that I clung to right away was music, right? Singing in the choir, playing guitar, anything that I could do, because that was just exciting to me. And my grandmother had taught me how to play the piano at a very young age. And that was just something that was sort of, I mean, from playing the recorder in second grade to, you know, learning how to play the piano and the guitar and to sing was just kind of part of that.
So you just got started at an early age singing. Always, I mean, what was your favorite instrument you were playing?
Probably the guitar. The guitar was cool. And through junior high and high school, I played the French horn.
Oh,
which
wow.
is
Very
not
cool.
one of the coolest instruments.
It's the one instrument in band that people are like, what is that thing?
Exactly.
Guitar is the coolest in a youth group as well. That's
I don't know.
the
Drums are,
instrument to
I think,
play.
the coolest.
Drums are pretty cool, but
yeah. Don't
the
forget the
guitar is
drummer.
more approachable for more people.
But then I quickly realized that the singer got all the attention. It didn't matter how good you were at guitar, the singer got all the attention, and I was a glutton for punishment. So that was sort of the direction that I went in.
Yeah. We just saw Jelly Roll last weekend, and it was so funny because I'm like, nobody's looking at the guitarist. Everybody's looking at the singer. So that literally just went through my mind when I was like, this guy's good at guitar, but I noticed because I'm into music, but most people, you're right. So you had to make your way to lead singer to be able to.
I'm a very below average guitar player. It's more of a prop on stage for me. Yeah.
So when you sing, you would like play the guitar and then you'd kind of swing it back and do your singing and then get it back out and gotcha.
Yeah, I used it to keep time. So when performing, I would lose sight of the drums and the bass, and so the guitar is what helped me keep in time, but also in tune. Yeah.
So growing up that way, were you a typical youth group kid? You know, it's a lot of your life is that it's you were looked at as a good kid, not a lot of.
I was a really, really good kid up until about 17. And I lived the model lifestyle that my parents wanted for me. And my older sister who had gone before me had gotten into a little bit of trouble. And so I was the white sheep of the family for my first 17 years. And I sort of relished that.
Was it a intensely controlling environment, or were you just naturally kind of gravitated towards that white sheep role? In other words, were your parents really strict and restrictive, or were you just kind of a compliant sort of kid?
I was in a very restrictive household. So we had a lot of rules. We had a lot of expectations. And my stepdad, who I love dearly, if he's listening to this, I do love you, Dad, was very strict and ruled with that iron fist. And so a lot of it was more out of just fear of what's going to happen if I do this wrong thing.
Which I would venture a guess is going to explain a lot about what's coming after you tell us your story post 17.
Right.
What happens at 17?
At 17, I was sworn into the Air Force. I had tested off the charts, highest in my high school on the ASVAB. And they said, well, you can have your pick of whatever job you want. You can be a linguist, which is you're essentially an interpreter. But I could not learn Arabic. And this was in the late 90s, and that was what everybody wanted you to learn. I didn't have the aptitude for it. And so I swore into the Air Force at 17 to go explosive ordnance disposal, which is bomb squad, essentially.
Wow.
And every branch of service has a bomb squad, but they all look to the Air Force's bomb squad. Don't ask me why, but it's the one. I'm guessing they blow the least amount of fingers off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, do you blow up the bombs from the sky?
I don't know, because I never went to EOD school. We had this brilliant idea at 17, and it's not a story I tell often, but it is part of my past, and I think it will give us a little bit better perspective of where we're going in this conversation. At the age of 17, I'd already been working for 3-4 years. I started working at 14, my first official job. But my first real job was a can of gas that my dad filled up and a lawnmower at age 10. And I just mowed the neighbors' yards for $5 or $10 here or there. So if I ever wanted nice shoes or I wanted nice things, that work ethic was instilled in me at a very, very young age. And so senior year of high school, myself and two of my buddies, they were going into the Marines. And we decided, okay, prom's coming up. We should get a limousine.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
All the cool kids have limousines.
$500 for a limousine. And my parents, very strict, knew what I make, right? So much has to go into savings, so much has to go to the church, and then what I get left over is essentially pennies. And so, well, gosh, we got to figure out a way to get some money. And my two friends who were going in the Marines didn't have any, but one was the son of a locksmith and knew how to break into a car. Yeah.
Oh, no.
It's a marketable skill.
It was a great skill. And here I'd never been in trouble before. I mean, maybe little stuff here and there, but I mean, maybe I skipped school once or twice, but I didn't drink, I didn't smoke in high school. There was a lot of things I didn't do. And it just seemed like a great idea. Well, we could break into a couple of cars, steal a couple of stereos, sell them at the commons during lunch at the school, and raise enough money, right? This was our GoFundMe in 1997. Raise enough money with stolen car stereos to pay for the limo. It was a brilliant idea, right?
Dude, you're the reason that I had an Alpine pull-out that I would carry with me everywhere, and then eventually a face-off. Remember the face-off stereos? Because I was worried about guys like you.
At 17, my life of crime began, and we broke into a handful of cars, and we had some success with it. And then we got a little too arrogant, as one does when you're 17 years old and stupid. And we broke into this car in front of a house party, and somebody heard it, and they came out with a baseball bat. And my friend and I ran in the opposite direction, and my buddy got caught, and they busted his hip.
Ooh.
Oh my gosh.
And we ran, and here's again the brilliance of it all, right? We're all camouflaged up, camo face paint, camo everything, because we're doing this.
Seriously.
We watched way too many movies.
There you go.
We watched way too many movies. And we're going through this, and we're sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, we gotta ditch the camo. They're gonna be looking for two dudes in camo and face paint.
That's the hard part about wearing camo is in
You stand out.
committing crimes.
When
They're
you
like,
try
that
not
might be
to.
the guy.
Has the opposite effect.
It does. So we book it to the canal, and we ditch all of our camo, and we wash off all of our face paint. And here's two 17-year-old kids walking down the canal road in their skivvies. I mean, so I don't know what sticks out more, the camo or a couple of kids at 11 o'clock at night in the pitch black walking down. And the next morning, of course, our friend ratted us out.
Oh, what a punk.
I know. So thus ended my life of crime. And and so we went down to juvenile detention. My dad took me there. He didn't say anything. right? He did the disappointed dad, right? There's always the yelling and there's the punishment and what I was fearing. Oh my gosh, I was so scared. What is going to happen? But if you ever want to get the most out of your kids, I think you go disappointed dad.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right?
That's strong.
Like, oh,
Yep.
disappointed dad. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. And so he bails me out of juvenile detention. He takes me to the Air Force recruiter's office. He's like, you need to go tell them what happened. And the Air Force recruiter said, well, and I had already sworn in at this point. I hadn't left. I was leaving right like 2 weeks after graduation to go to San Antonio for basic. And he said, well, you need to tell them what you did. And they said, yeah, unfortunately that, that kind of scratches that. So they faxed over my other than honorable discharge because I hadn't formally gone through any training. I didn't get a dishonorable discharge, but it was an other than honorable. And so I never had the opportunity to serve. And Army and Navy had heard all the commotion, heard the story behind everything. And they popped their heads in and they said, well, we'll take you for infantry.
Oh, wow.
And
They're like, we need a guy with the skills of breaking into cars. If you've got that.
right.
We just need bodies for
Who
infantry.
can
Right.
wear face paint and camouflage. And the truth of it is I was an absolute coward at 17. And I was a coward for probably the following 20 plus years of my life after that. And it was a good lesson for me to learn because I had hundreds of hours of community service. I had to replace and pay restitution. I had to go through the court system. Even as a juvenile, and if you search my record, there's nothing on my record because I was a juvenile. And I had to go through that entire summer that I was supposed to be in San Antonio. I was in Bend, Oregon, and I was raking people's lawns, and I was fixing everything that I had broken.
Okay, so identity-wise, your identity up until this moment, nobody would
was
have
a
expected this
shock.
of you. Yeah. So now you see yourself as one thing, and then do you kind of shift your identity at that point as like, maybe I'm not the good kid I grew up as, maybe I'm...
At that point, there was a crack in the dam. There was a chink in the armor.
Yeah.
And it led to some more idiotic early adult behavior at that point. And so, well, heck, the gloves are off. I did my time, and then I found alcohol. Right at 18, I moved out on my 18th birthday.
Whoa.
It was a celebration. I couldn't wait to get out of the house because there was this entire world out there that I didn't know existed.
And now you're a hardened ex-con.
I'm a hardened ex-con. I did my time, and I've got the badge of courage. So on my 18th birthday, I bought a can of chew, I bought a Playboy, and I bought a pack of cigarettes. And the cigarettes stuck with me for 25 years.
Wow.
Whoa.
Yeah. I didn't tell you yesterday when we were golfing. Yesterday was a 1-year anniversary of when I quit smoking.
No way.
It was the last.
Yeah,
It was the last of
congratulations.
the bad habits I had to go.
Fascinating that you grew up in this controlled environment. I guess my question for you is, because it was so controlled and you considered yourself a good kid, went to church, did all the right things in all the right way, but didn't necessarily do so of your choosing. You did it because you had to. When you got the opportunity to break outside of that, was it just that whole pursuit of, I want to do what I want to do? Or was it rebellion against all that control, or some combination of both?
I think it was more searching for myself and searching for acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't matter where it came from. And after I had a story to tell, I was then accepted in other groups,
Different circle.
a different circle.
That resonates.
And my eyes were opened. And to me, it became more about being accepted and being important and being valued. Very, very selfish behavior in hindsight.
Did the other two guys go off to the military, or did the other two guys from your caper?
I'm not exactly sure what happened to the other gentlemen. We had a no contact order that the judge put in place.
Wow.
You guys cannot talk to each other. You cannot
Interesting.
meet. And this would have been early May of 1997. And so, right before prom, and didn't go to prom. I did get to walk with my class for graduation, and my high school graduation present was supposed to be something pretty spectacular, and instead I got a monogrammed Bible,
Whoa.
and that was that. And we didn't have a graduation party. We didn't have any of that. I was still in trouble. I didn't turn 18 until August of that year, so that entire summer I was still in prison is what I felt. So I had all of this resentment build up.
Still suffering from your father's disappointment and
Disappointed dad goes, I'm telling you, it went a long way. It took years of therapy to get through.
interesting.
Yeah.
It's just so interesting. It's almost like you're playing a role up until 17, and you're in a small town, right? Bend
Right.
was tiny back then.
Yeah, 25,000 people.
Yeah. So it's almost like your role changed
Mhm.
and you accepted this new role of, well, within this town, I guess I'm the guy who did this thing. Therefore, what would that guy do?
And I'm going to double
Yeah.
down on that and again
Yeah.
take on this new role, which is no more you than the previous role,
Right.
but it's the role you embraced.
And then I found, alcohol was one of those things where I'd gotten sick the first couple of times I did it, and it wasn't that great. But then I found weed.
Oh, wow.
And I had another harebrained scheme at 18 years old that I was going to buy a bunch of weed and I was going to sell it. And then that's how I was going to make my money.
And the impact here, just pausing for a second,
Right.
orogrown didn't exist.
No.
This wasn't like there
It
were
was not
weed
legal.
stores. So when people,
There was no
I
corner
feel like
weed
gradually
shop.
we're
Yeah.
forgetting the power that it had in the world back then. And that was a drug. You're trying to be a drug dealer
Controlled
at the time.
substance.
Illegal in every state and
Yes.
for the federal government.
Right.
There was no exception.
Right. So I bought a bunch of weed, and I like to talk a lot. That's one of my, I guess you could call it a character defect, is I tell on myself now. I'm really good at telling at myself. And I think I had it dating all the way back to when I was a kid, because I was a terrible liar. And my parents always knew when I was lying, and I thought I was a fantastic liar. And I had to brag to the guys downstairs in the apartment complex that, hey, I've got all this weed if you want to buy some. And they said, no, we're good. Well, I went to work. I was a breakfast line cook at Sherry's, and I went for the early morning shift, and I came back 8-10 hours later, and my apartment had been broken into. All my weed was gone. All my cash everything was gone. And I'm sitting here going to myself, not looking back saying, you probably didn't have a really good idea in that, and you probably shouldn't have opened your mouth. What I thought is, gosh, I should have gotten better locks on the door. I should have had a safe, right? I didn't think about what led up to that in my behavior. I continued to digress even further, right? So I made a geographic, because that's what you should do when you're young and you're looking for yourself and you have problems that are haunting you, is you run. So I made a geographic change and ended up in 1999 in Mesa, Arizona. And I was going to go to Arizona State. And I had all of these. I was going to get my life back on track. I was going to get a fresh start. And so my aunt and uncle said, well, you can live with us until you get a job and until you go to school, and then move out into the dorms. And Arizona State, just in case you're wondering, is still very much a party school. And in the late 90s, it was the mecca of party schools. And growing up in this very controlled environment, I couldn't wait to get to Arizona State. And I get down there, and my uncle says, well, you got to work a job. And I think he had been a loan officer at that time for 4 or 5 years. And my aunt had been a loan processor. Well, they ended up getting me an interview at Principal Financial Group. At that time, they were doing wholesale mortgages, and they got me an interview as a funder. So this is back when it was 10-key dot matrix printers. Everything was done on triplicate paper. And I got a job as a funder. And that's when I broke into the mortgage business. And I felt so important. Here I am, I'm wearing slacks, I'm wearing a shirt and tie, and my life is really going somewhere. I've got a cubicle, right?
Yeah.
These things that matter. I'm 19 years old. I've sort of put, I've had a couple of brushes, just a couple of really dumb things that I've done in my life, and it was time to be an adult. And
You're done with your drug dealing career
I'm
of a
done with
week.
I'm done with the
Yeah.
drug dealing
Short-lived.
career. Now it's white collar crimes only. And so this was my introduction. Well, I had made enough money, and I was making $12.50 an hour in 1999 in Arizona at the time when minimum wage was $3.75 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
I was what they call in Scottsdale the $30,000 millionaire. I had my 1989 Toyota Celica GT with the sunroof. I was so cool.
Just rolling in it.
Rolling in it. I got my own apartment, and I was cool. And the people I had moved in next door to, ended up having a very, I would say complex, I wouldn't say complicated, but I would say complex relationship over the next 5 years. And I suddenly felt accepted, like I belonged. And that was the part of my past, my dark past, were the people that I moved in next to. And we became fast friends. And here I was, this, milk toast guy, wearing his slacks and his collared shirt and driving to and from. And he had worked, the guy that I lived next door to worked in telemarketing. And he was making hand over fist money. I mean, they were driving a Lincoln Navigator, which in the late
Nav
90s,
was, that was
right?
huge.
They had all the cool things that I wanted. And so I quit my job at the principal, and I went to work for him. So I got into telemarketing, and I didn't have the stomach for it. I was really good at it, but I didn't have the stomach for it. And in the 2 weeks that I was working there, somebody had shot someone else while I was there.
In the
phone.
building?
Oh, right. Like 2 cubicles down from me. A guy stood up with a .22 revolver, shot the other guy in the stomach, and stormed out. And this is like in central Phoenix, right? And everybody go back to work. Right? Cops come. We're still working. We're still dialing for dollars. Grandma, go get your credit card. We're going to charge you $399 for your identity theft protection. And I just didn't have the stomach for it.
Wow.
It was very, very painful because
That scared me so
That-
much. Right now. What was
whatever that drop was, I think it was my bag. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we're talking about shooting. You say I don't have the stomach for it. I'm thinking the stomach that other guy didn't have as well. And then right then that thing drops and
And then the bag drops.
whew,
Well done, by the way.
horrible
That's great
timing
effects.
on that, dude. I don't know how you did it, but that was impactful.
To what? This is just a curiosity on my part, but to what do you attribute that pang of? I'm assuming it was a pang of conscience, like I can't do this. I'm taking advantage of people, or I just hate this job.
I feel like I'm taking advantage of these people. Hearing them on the phone, we had a script that we had to stick to, and it was really like a sweatshop. And you got paid in cash every day, and you got to get your name on the board for how many sales you got. And my neighbor was number one every single day. He was making $1,200-$1,500 cash a day, and
Which should, now you're looking back and going, that's probably a red flag. That
it was a red flag.
Yeah.
It was a red flag. And so, I'm 2 weeks there, and I'm just eating a hole in my stomach because I have this conscience, and like God's still a part of my life.
That's really what I was getting at. Is you have this foundation that wasn't idyllic, and it had some problems in its strictness for you that you pushed back against, but there was still this foundation of principles in your life that
Right.
stayed with you.
So I quit, and I walked 5 miles from Central Phoenix out to West Tempe, which is where I had my apartment, 105, 110 degrees, and I'm sobbing hysterically, and I'm walking down the sidewalk going, what am I doing with my life? These people are ripping people off left and right, and I can't do this. I mean, here I am, big city. I mean, the Phoenix Valley at that point probably had 4 or 5 million people, and there's, someone had gotten shot a few days earlier, and there's no way that what we were doing was legal. There's just no way. And I couldn't live with myself. I didn't care how good the money was. And so moved back to Bend, and I couldn't dare ask my parents for money, or hey, can I stay with you, or hey, I've fallen on good terms, because I had all this pride and ego. I was going to make something of myself.
So you could have, but in your own head, you couldn't.
I didn't. So I moved back to Bend, and my longest friend, 𝗟𝗀𝘀𝘀𝐻, I will use his name. He grew up in the church with him, and he was homeschooled, and we're same age. Every single summer in my sort of tween and teen years, every single summer was spent at the baseball field, and we'd play home run derby, and his dad would come pitch to us, and I'd stay the night, and we'd have dinner, and it was the Leave It to Beaver, right? It was the Beaver family, and they said, hey, we'll take you in. We realize you're on hard times. And so they opened their house to me, and they said, you're going to get back on your feet. And I'd had a little bit of experience cooking as a breakfast cook, and then I got a job as a sous chef at one of the resorts in Bend, and I loved it. Made enough money to buy a vehicle.
What happened to the 𝗟𝗏𝘀𝘀?
The 𝗟𝗏𝘀𝘀 ended up overheating, and my uncle had given me the loan for the 𝗟𝗏𝘀𝘀, and so I just left it. I didn't pay back the loan, and I just sort of left it at the apartment complex.
Did you give him the keys to it or anything so you could?
Yeah, no.
Okay,
no,
gotcha.
I just left it.
It might still be there.
I was a coward. It very well could be. I was a coward, right? I couldn't face the music. I just had to run. I had to run to something, and someone else saved me. And so here I am. I'm sort of making something better of myself, and I get a call from my friends down in Arizona, and they're like, hey, we're doing this. Why don't you come down and work? And I just had this, I still had almost like the devil and the angel on the shoulder, right? And I just had this sort of dark passenger that was like, hey, come back down here. It's not going to be like it was. That whole thing got shut down. It ended up being illegal, and we're not like that, but you got to come back down here. And so after 3-4 months of getting my act together, if you will, I'm back in Arizona.
Did the family you were staying with try and stop you?
Yes.
But you were like,
I had my mind made up.
Right.
My real friends were down there. My real friends. And that's something that is a definition that I've had to learn over the past 25 years, right? What is a real friend?
If you are watching this podcast and you're in the mortgage industry and you haven't checked out the Knowledge Coop, you definitely need to dive into the Knowledge Coop. In there, you will find content and community that will help you grow as an individual by learning everything there is to know about the mortgage industry. If you think you know everything, just dive in and take some classes, because there's always something more you can learn. To be successful in this business, you've got to continually learn. In addition, if you're a company and you want to teach your people in your own environment, we've got that in the Knowledge Coop Enterprise Services. So reach out to us, check out knowledgecoop.com. Definitely join Coop Plus. Let's get back to the podcast. I want to ask you something, because I'm always thinking about who's going to be listening to this and needs to hear, some wisdom. If you can think of that moment in your life from the perspective of the parents you were living with, of the family you were living with, could they have said anything? And if so, what?
I don't think they could have said anything. I was hell-bent in blazing my own trail.
So they did everything they could.
They did absolutely everything they could and more.
I mean, I think you and I both try to save people. Like, that's part of our life. And so I think of it as, kids my kids are friends with, and like, you're always trying to save them, but you can't talk sense into them. You're saying you couldn't have been talked to, or okay.
You could have handed me $1 million and a house and a sports car and a beautiful wife, and it wouldn't matter.
You would have still sabotaged it.
I was still going to sabotage it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to rewind the clock about 15 years from that moment. And something that haunted me well through my 20s and 30s was the Arizona State Spelling Bee when I was 9 or 10 years old. So I was the best speller in my entire school in 4th grade. And so I got a ticket to the Arizona State Spelling Bee, right? And that was a big deal. Still is a big deal for kids.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I got the first word, and the first word is always just to get through the nerves and everything. And the word that I landed on was success. And I misspelled success.
It's hard. There's two C's, right?
Succes, success.
You missed a C.
I was the second person to go, and I'm on stage with 50 other kids, and I was crushed. And that sort of stuck with me, in that whole self-sabotaging personality trait that I had developed stayed with me for the next few decades.
Wow.
So we're back.
Ironic it was success too, that you couldn't even spell success.
It's, you know, it's an amazing part of my story. My story is not amazing, but when I look back at it, that's when it all started.
Oh my God.
4th grade.
Wow.
So I'm back in Arizona, and, you know, I don't want to share so much of the mess as I do want to share the message, but I'm just not doing great things. I'm hopping from job to job in the mortgage industry, and, you know, one thing's leading to the next, and I'm moving around every 3 to 6 months with my neighbors, who were now my roommates. And they were doing their thing, and I'm not going to incriminate anything, but they weren't necessarily living by the letter of the law. And I just wanted to be cool. I was accepted, right? I was part of the gang. It was very much a gang mentality, and the two brothers had both been in an actual gang in Southern California. And so there was this fear aspect, but also this, hey, you're one of us. You've got protection. Nothing bad's ever going to happen to you. If anything bad was going to happen, it was going to be from their hand and not someone else's.
When the criteria for acceptance is so low with that group that you can't screw that up.
Oh, I can screw anything up. Just give me enough time. So I had, you know, gotten in trouble a couple of times. I got arrested for possession of marijuana, and it was the first time I'd ever felt handcuffs on. And this was, I would have been 21, 22 years old. And, you know, went through the jail system in Maricopa County, Arizona. And it's not somewhere where you want to go to jail. It's very hot, and the people are not very nice.
I think that's probably consistent with other jails.
That's a good definition of maybe not the hot part.
And so, you know, I'd gone through probation. I had a year where I couldn't drink. I had to pee in a cup twice a week. You'd call this hotline, and if your color came up, you'd have to go and you'd have to pay every time. So I peed in a cup for a year and didn't drink, didn't smoke weed.
Was that hard to not drink during that time?
You know, at first, yes. But after a while, it was just like, hey, you know what? It was painted to me this way. You got to do your time, right?
Yeah.
It's a badge of honor in that community.
Yeah.
You're just doing your time. You'll be able to drink and party and get back to the rest of it once you've done your time. So I'm doing my time, right? I'm paying all these things back, and I'm still thinking that the world is the problem. I'm not the problem. You know, we were living in this, while we were moving every 3 to 6 months, is this program back in the early 2000s called Show Homes of America, where we would rent these multi-million dollar houses for like $800, $900 a month. So they were staged. So real estate agents or sellers could have their home staged looking as if it were lived in. I was living on Camelback Mountain with 2 pools, like 6-car garage. I was living the high life, but I was a total fraud. And I'm telling you, we were all driving expensive cars. We were not necessarily doing things by the book, right? On the outside looking in, we looked successful. We went out to eat at like the Ocean Club and Fleming's and $1,500, $2,000 dinners. Yet our total net worth combined was maybe 10 grand, right? So we're total imposters, and I don't see anything wrong, right? I didn't really need a career. I was making money as a door-to-door salesman selling solar screens, and I'd had a couple of jobs here and there. I'd worked for a title company for a few months, and then I worked for Countrywide for a
Oh,
little
yeah.
while.
Fast and easy.
Everybody remembers,
Yep.
yeah, fast and easy. And so I was starting to build a resume, but there was really no loyalty, and you could see my resume in my early 20s. I'd probably worked half a dozen places in 3 or 4 mortgage type companies. And 2005, things really started going downhill for me. I was drinking a lot. I was doing other drugs. I was living that party lifestyle. I wanted to feel cool. And this is before the Kardashians and before the Real Housewives and before all the glitz and the glamour. We just wanted to be the coolest people in Scottsdale, Arizona. And that consciousness in the back of my head that we talked about when I left the telemarketing company, it finally started to creep its way back in. Here I was 25 years old, couldn't tell you what I had done with the previous 5 years of my life. And I was drinking, I was doing drugs, I was doing anything I could to numb the pain and quiet that consciousness. And Thanksgiving 2005, my great-grandma was celebrating her 100th birthday in 𝗟𝗏𝘀, Arizona, which was like an hour and a half away. And my parents were coming down. I hadn't even seen or spoken to my parents for a couple of years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that relationship was completely estranged, mostly in hindsight because I was ashamed of who I was and who I'd become, and I knew that they wouldn't approve. So it was easier for me to just not talk to them because I didn't want to hear their disapproval. I knew better than they did. So things are coming up. I know that they're coming down. Everybody wants me to come up there. I'm just a hungover mess. I'm just a shell of a human being at 25. And I had been riding this really hard road, and I had decided enough was enough. It was time to ask for help. And that was the first time in my life I ever asked my parents for help. And so I called my dad, and I was so scared that somebody was going to hear me, right? That the gang was going to hear me.
Oh, of course.
And that's essentially what we were. You know, there were, I don't know, 8 or 10 of us. It essentially was a gang without it being a formal gang. It had that mentality. And I went off and I called my dad and I just said, look, I'm ready to come home. I need your help. And I packed my guitar. I packed everything into my car that I could fit. And I left my band. I had a band in Arizona. We got second place at the Phoenix Battle of the Bands.
Wow.
I'd started rocking and rolling, and that was huge, right? That was a totally different scene. But I packed everything into my little 1997 2-door Dodge Neon with glass packs.
Nice.
Of course.
Glass packs. And I said, oh, hey, yeah, I'm going to be gone for Thanksgiving. I'm going up to 𝗟𝗏𝘀. And they said, okay, well, we'll see you when you get back, 𝗍𝗏𝘀. That was my name, my nickname.
Fizzle?
𝗍𝗏𝘀 with a V.
Vizzle.
𝗍𝗏𝘀. Yeah.
All right.
𝗍𝗏𝘀 was my name. And so, well, all right, we'll see you when you get back, 𝗍𝗏𝘀. And I get there, and I'm so happy to see all this family I hadn't seen in half a dozen years. I didn't even talk to my aunt and uncle. I was estranged from them, and we lived essentially in the same geographical area, but the Toyota Celica that I never paid back, and all of the bridges I had burned there, and all the things I had done, I was too ashamed. But it was good to see everyone, and everyone welcomed me back with open arms.
Wow.
And it was the only time I ever took a loan from my dad. It was $300 for gas money, and I drove 20 hours straight in my Dodge Neon, and I had forgotten my CD collection. And the only CD I had was Green Day, Wake Me Up When September Ends, whatever album that was. So it's the only CD, and I had a broken antenna, so I didn't get the radio.
Oh, wow.
For 20 hours. So ask me if I like Green Day to this day. I don't listen to a whole lot of Green Day. So I make it back up, and I get in. I end up getting a job that kind of gets me off of my aunt and uncle's couch because I couldn't stay with my parents. I still couldn't bear it. Right. And so my other aunt and uncle let me stay on their couch for a few weeks, and I ended up renting a room from someone and roommates, and it's time to clean my act up, right? I can drink, but these other substances, I don't need to do these things. Mm-hmm. So I start building my resume as a loan processor. I got hired as a loan processor in 2006 for a company, and we were still riding the crazy wave.
Mm-hmm.
And here comes that consciousness again. You know, people were forging documents. They were doing anything and everything they could do to make a buck. And suddenly I was placed in what felt like a little bit more of a white collar sweatshop than I had been at before. And the company I was working for, it was, yeah, they're not going to qualify. As I'm doing the numbers, and we'll just write this down instead. It's stated. Okay, so you're a custodian and you're making $32,000 a month. Okay, pack it and ship it and fund the loan. And
which, by the way, non-mortgage people don't believe this sometimes, that this is as common as we make it sound. It was very common. This was every office. You didn't work in the one place that like was doing these things. You went to work for a mortgage company, and back then that existed in a lot of mortgage companies.
Oh, and the calling the appraiser, hey, I really need this to come in at 500,000.
Right.
And so I wasn't a loan officer, right? I'm shuffling the papers, I'm processing, I'm doing as I'm told. I need a job, yes, whatever. But I'm sitting here and I'm witnessing these people that are cutting every single corner to make a buck, and they are living high on the hog. I mean, real money, right? Not this fake Scottsdale pretend stuff, but they're making real money, and they've got real tangible assets. And I'm watching this, and in the calls to the appraisers, I made those phone calls. Oh, just call so and so. He'll come in at value. He comes in at value every time. Just tell him the value we need, because I'm taking direction. This is my job. Are you sure? This can't be right. Oh yeah, no, this is how we do things. So
here you are trying to become a better version of yourself. You get into what appears to be a good industry with reputable professional people.
Yep.
And it ends up being a different level of what you had just experienced in Arizona.
Right.
Man.
So, but everything seemed above board. It was a really nice office. People weren't getting shot. I was paying taxes.
Upgrade.
I was paying taxes. Right? Everything felt legit. The company was growing. We were building a newer, bigger office. It was exciting. In 2007, started seeing some cracks in the armor. Right? Couple of companies, Option One.
Easy.
Sent a lot of stuff to Option One.
Yep.
I know your connection to Option One. And then American Brokers Conduit. And then so many different names, Countrywide, all these implosions, and we're literally sitting there watching the implodometer, and we're moving. We've got dozens of files, and as soon as one hits the implodometer, we take all those files and we move it to the next one, and we just hope that we can get these files closed with these products before the whole machine implodes. And it was really scary. I got my final paycheck in working for this company, and they said, we got to let you go. We're getting too slow. Well, 2-3 weeks later, that whole company folded. Nobody got a paycheck. So I was lucky.
Wow.
So I went to work for another guy that needed a processor, and I worked there for 3 months. And it was a World Savings option arm. And World Savings was one of the first. And World Savings was actually it was a great bank, and it was a great product if people understood it.
Right.
Used it correctly.
If it was used correctly, it was actually a good product. Thing is, nobody was using anything correctly back in those days. So World Savings had made the change and started requiring documentation. It was no longer just stated. They're like, hey, we are going to cover our butt, because behind the scenes they were working on selling to Wachovia, and we all know what Wachovia did to WAMU and where that whole toxic train led to, right? So I'm working on this deal, and it's a $2.5 million loan on a $4 million property. And understanding and knowing how the business works now, how much money was probably tied to that $2.5 million, that was probably a $75,000 to $100,000 commission that the loan officer was needing. And the loan officer, who was the owner of the company, came back to me. He was super angry, and he said, we need it now. We need a W-2. I need you to find me software, or find me something.
Oh boy.
We got to send a W-2. And these were for his top referral partners, who were like the big Mr. and Mrs. Real estate agent, top of the line real estate agent, cream of the crop in Central Oregon at the time. We need to do this. And so I started looking for whatever, a PDF to input a W-2, because nothing at that point had been verified with the IRS. You just needed the document. And so I started researching it, and I just don't feel good about it. And I told him no, and I got fired, and I didn't get my last check.
Whoa.
I don't know if the loan closed or not. But that was sort of the first stand that I took, that I had started seeing some cracks in the armor in a couple of years. Like, people are just this is so dishonest.
But this is a new Randy, because you knew other stuff was dishonest, and you were like, still hang with these guys. And this is like the moment where you said, I've decided this new Randy is really a thing.
Now, that was my question: is what do you think led to that? That previous upbringing, that pang of conscience, whatever, but you reached the point where enough was enough.
Yeah, I wanted to sleep. I wanted to feel good about what I was doing. I've always been incredibly competitive, and if I was a loan processor, I was going to be the best dang loan processor that there ever was. Whatever company I worked for, I wanted to be number one. I wanted to be the best. I wanted to walk on water. I wanted people to look at me as an example of how good I was.
Wow.
And sorry, we'll reel humility back into the conversation later.
No, I love that this new version of yourself starts showing up, and it really probably was a version that you had already grown up with, that you just lost your way.
Yeah. So, I processed for another 5 companies in a 2-3 year span. A few of those I didn't get final checks from. Most notably, I had moved after getting fired. I had moved back down to Scottsdale, and I didn't tell my friends, right?
Wow.
I didn't tell the gang.
Yeah.
So in 2008, I'm back in Scottsdale, and I'm managing a processing department for this company out of Ohio. And there's 30 some odd people in Scottsdale. And I'm there for a couple of months. And, the drug use and the alcohol use, it was starting to ramp up again. Let's not forget about that part of the story, because that does end up leading us, hopefully, to a lesson from last time. And so I'm ramping up because I'm feeling more pressure. This is the first time I've had an opportunity to manage people. We come into the office on a Monday morning, middle of 2008, and I'm there at 6:30 a.m. every morning to unlock the doors for everyone. And I unlock the door, and everything's gone. Everything, everyone's personal effects, desks, chairs, things on the wall, every single paper clip was gone. The entire place had been cleaned out. The only thing left standing was the receptionist desk, because it was bolted to the floor. But they would have taken that too. Nobody got a final check from that.
Jeez.
Yeah, nobody got a final check from that. So here I am.
Mid-08, you said.
This mid-08, right? Here I am. I really feel like I'm starting to get my life together. I'm making better decisions. Dad, I need to come back up. Can I have a few $100 for gas money? So I come back up. I got a job with a guy where we started doing this. Was when LendingTree was really starting to become a thing, and there was a refi boom in 2009 and in 2010 where people were getting out of these toxic mortgages. Right, a lot of changes had been made. We weren't quite to LO comp yet. That was later in 2010.
But there had been a good bit of Fed reform.
There had been a good bit of reform. Things were being done the right way. And so I got this job. It was Express Loan America, and we were just doing leads off of LendingTree and Bankrate. And I was processing 50 to 70 loans a month. And we had 4 or 5 loan officers, and it was just the phone rang, picked up, you got a refi. Phone rang, picked up, got a refi. And a lot of these, even liars loans, they had some, there was the HARP, the HARP funds, and then there was the TARP. There was HARP and TARP. And so, we were just cranking through these things. And in 2010, I went to work for he's now a competitor of mine, but he's a colleague, he's a friend. Matt over at Northwestern Home Loans gave me an opportunity to work for him. And so worked with him and, for a little bit over a year. And beginning of 2011, everything had just stopped. The market was bottoming out. Nobody was buying in real estate. Everything was toxic. Banks had failed. All these mortgage companies, you hear stories like Taylor Bean and Whitaker, all these things are coming out, right? And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, all right, I'm 31, 32 years old, and I've got to reinvent myself. All the while, I'm rocking out pretty good. I built this band, and that's how I'm making some side cash as I'm playing, 5, 10, 15 shows a month, anything I could to make money. And that was sort of my creative outlet, because I needed that creative outlet. I still needed that music, and that music dates all the way back to when I was growing up in the church and going to Young Life. And even though my music at the time was secular, it was just, I needed that part of my life. And that was sort of my security blanket. Well, 2011, I still look at as one of the best years of my life. I feel like 23 and 24 have hands down been by far the best years of my life. But 2011, for this reason, I wasn't in the mortgage industry because I couldn't find a job, no matter how hard I tried. I was making unemployment for the first time ever, and I was mowing lawns again.
Oh my
wow.
gosh.
Oh, wow.
The first job that I started
That
when I was
gas
10 years
can
old,
and yeah.
I was mowing lawns again, and I was making $10 an hour cash, and I just went around. I was in the best shape ever. I was tan. I had no stress, right? We talk about stress when dealing with anything in real estate, whether you're on the title and escrow side or you're originating or, you're in real estate. There's so much stress that goes with it. And it was great. I was in great shape. The band was doing really, really well. We were doing some pretty big performances, opening up for some really big acts. And 2012 came around, the unemployment money ran out, and then I went to work as a processor again.
Wow. So you go back to processing.
So I go back to processing, but this time I've got some stability. And the boss that I had, Mark Worthington, and he's a name that a lot of people, I think, maybe that even listen to this podcast will know, especially in the Northwest. Just a good guy.
Yeah.
And he's at the top of my list of good bosses that I've had. He later in 2015 would marry my wife and I. Right.
Oh, wow.
So I make this connection with this guy, and they do things the right way. I had never seen it in all this time. I had never seen quite to this level where it was just, hey, we can't win them all. And as long as we're doing the right thing the right way, and we can all sleep at night. And there were more deals that he would turn away if he ever got the sense that there was either something shady about the deal or trying to fit something that didn't quite meet above board standards. He wouldn't do it. But he also had this passion for helping first-time buyers, right? Maybe people who came in and they had a 450 credit score, and he would work with them for like 2-3 years.
Oh, wow.
And they would end up buying a house, and it was the happiest, most dynamic moment in their life up until then. And I just watched what he did and how he carried himself and how he was, pardon me, to the other members of the team. And he treated everyone with respect. And while there's drama going on in the office or arguments or things, he always managed to pause and take in everything. He was not reactionary at all. He was methodical. And I had never seen that. Even growing up, I had never seen that sort of an example. And I wanted that. Right? I was drawn to that. And so I worked for him for 5 years. And
that was your longest job at the time.
I was the best processor that company had ever seen.
Wow.
I was just always number one. I ended up meeting my wife in end of 2013 at that stage, and she was working at the lock desk in Portland, where the main office was. And if she listens to this, she's going to hate that I'm going to tell this story, but I'm going to tell it anyways.
Here goes.
So here goes, babe. Plug your ears. So I get an email from the lock desk, and it's this new guy that I think named Quinn, right? And Quinn has all these sort of funny one-liners when they send out the lock confirmation, and just a really cool connection. And so I called the lock desk manager, and I was just like, hey, you know, this Quinn person, fellow, whatever, seems great. And you know, just really like it. Like, when did you hire them? Oh, I don't know. They started a couple of weeks ago. Well, you know what? The next time I'm in town, I'm bringing a 12-pack of something for Quinn, because I really like that guy. And I genuinely thought for the first few weeks I was talking to a man, because the only Quinn I went to high school with was a guy.
Yeah.
And come to find out, she actually never corrects people, because she got so tired of doing it that, like, if someone said, hey, thanks, man, she just wouldn't correct them. Or if they said he or whatever, like, she just, whatever, I'm not going to correct you. Like, we don't have a relationship. Right. And I remember we were kind of developing this email friendship. Here, I'm just thinking it's just another cool guy, because I want to take care of the people. And I've learned by this example that we treat our underwriters, our closers, our funders, we treat them with respect, and we're thankful for the job that they do. And being an ops myself at the time, those were the relationships that I loved, right? I saw what the loan officers made, and that was good for them. But I also saw their lifestyle, and I had known from the previous 10 years, I didn't want to be that guy. I wanted to be the best at getting the loans closed, right? And seeing things before they happened. And so I've got a 12-pack of Corona, and I walk in the lock desk office, and
where's my boy? Where's my boy Quinn?
Where's boy Blue?
Well, there's this cute girl with her face is facing the wall on her computer, and she's got earbuds in. And I'd say, hey, what's up, Mike? What's up, Ian? You know, I brought you guys some beers. Not even knowing who this is, because you go to corporate, there's someone new in a desk every time you're there. It's just sort of the revolving door. And I was like, so where's Quinn? And she pops the earbud out. She looks back at me, and I was, I'm not going to tell you exactly what my thought was, but it was a very juvenile thought at the time. But I was just like, hubba. And so we met, and we talked more, because here I've
you had to reframe every email you'd sent.
Reframe completely every. I wish I could go back to those emails just to look.
Oh
that would be really hilarious. So here I am. Wow, she's like, I mean, she's cool. She's got a personality, and like, and
sense
she's
of humor.
Hot.
Yeah.
And she's hot. Oh my gosh.
And you have a
jackpot.
connection, and
And so we developed this friendship, and over the next 6 months, I'm going over to Portland maybe once a month. She's coming over to Bend 3 times a month.
Oh, wow.
And for the first few months of us developing this friendship, right, because we weren't boyfriend and girlfriend, I made her sleep on the couch. Like, we had kissed a little bit, but I don't know, it was weird. We were both in a really, really tough spot in our lives. At the end of 2013, my grandma, who was the matriarch of our family, passed away. And around that time, or a little bit before, you know, her dad had gone away to prison on a life sentence. And that's all I'm going to share about that. But here we were 2 damaged people, and we were in the right place at the right time for each other. And so we built this relationship, and every relationship I'd ever had with women up until that point, it was purely selfish reasons. What am I going to get out of this? Right? It was just all surface level. Nothing was deep. And I feel like she was God sent for me at that time. Right? And the way that our relationship developed and matured over time, it wasn't love at first sight. I think there was that lust at first sight part, but it wasn't, oh my gosh, I'm in love with this person. So a year goes by, and she moves to Bend, and she's able to work for the company remotely, and she works out of the Bend office, and you know, we get a house together, we get a couple of dogs, and on her birthday in 2015, which is Earth Day, we're at the coast, and I've got a ring, and I'm very shaky. And I get down on one knee and I propose to her. And I mean, what is wrong with you? What is going on? And she seriously did not see it coming.
Jeez.
So, you know, I proposed to this woman, and it was really, it just felt like the next thing to do. I still wasn't sure of who I was as a human being. Let's just get that really clear. At that point, I still did not have great self-awareness. I still did everything out of selfishness. Everything was self-serving. This just felt like the next right thing to do. Well, she said yes. We got married. This is how committed to the mortgage game that my wife and I are. Do you remember Trid Day?
Yeah.
What day is that?
August.
No.
The second was August. The first was May.
October 3rd, 2015 is when it actually came to fruition.
Went into effect.
It went into effect.
Okay.
So
it was supposed to be August.
was
It
supposed to
ended
be
up being
August.
October.
Ended up being
Okay.
October 3rd, 2015. That's the day that we got married in
The
Pacific
only
City
good thing
on
to
the
happen
coast.
on that day.
It was a great thing. At least it was a Saturday. Well, you know, like any marriage, right? You have good years and you have bad years. I'm still working as a processor. I hadn't gotten my license yet. That happened in 2016. But you know, we go through the normal things that all couples do. And I'm still performing a lot. We're getting bigger acts, more acts, going on the road, doing things. I think the coolest or most monumental show that I played was opening for Scott Weiland in 2015, which was the year that he died.
Oh, wow.
It was one of the last shows that he ever played. And when I had the chance to meet him, he was a shell of a human being.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. So, you know, here I am. I'm married. I don't know how that happened. Now I've got a couple of dogs. Now we've got a house. And I still don't know who Randy is. I haven't taken the time to get to know who I am. And I started getting resentful, right? I started thinking, well, maybe I don't need to be married. Even though this woman who has been through me in like my darkest days up until this point, and I had been there for her, I started questioning that and really who I was. And so, yeah, I just started drinking more and more and more. And I did anything every day, all day, from, you know, I'd say 2013 to 2018. I don't know if I could patch a week together of days where I wasn't loaded.
Wow.
But most people didn't know this about me. I hid it very well. I like to drink at home. I would go out and I'd have a drink or two with people, and I would never get drunk when I was performing. I did that one time on a St. Patty's Day when people were feeding us shots of Irish whiskey. I had one too many and we had to stop the show. And I said, never again.
Mm-hmm.
So those weren't the times when I went drinking. I couldn't wait till the show was over so I could go home and drink and numb out the way I wanted to numb out. And so, you know, when you're chemically altering your brain, those voices of doubt and resentment, those things can really creep up and creep in. And while I thought I was resenting everyone else around me for my life not being perfect, what I came to find out with years of therapy is I was really resenting myself. Because I'd done all this damage, right? We've talked about damage up until this point of just the stupid things that I could have, you know, that I've done. I've had a really good roadmap for a successful, good, clean living life, and yet I wanted more. I had this disease of more where if some is good, more is better, right? And I wanted more. And so in 2016, I got my license to originate. I got my first job, but the company I was with said, we don't want any new loan officers. I was like,
Right.
I'm your best processor. Like, yeah, no, we want you to stay our best processor. Here's a big raise. I get a big raise. I just had this, I had my mind made up, right? I had my mind made up that I wanted to be an originator. So this company that's based out of Portland here said, all right, we'll give you a shot. And we open up a branch. They're helping me with recruiting. I'm struggling. My first year, I think I did 7, maybe 10 loans
A month or all year?
all year.
That's
Whoa.
tough.
Yeah.
I think it was just under 4 million in total production. And I knew everything there was to know about loan programs. I didn't know how to market myself. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And here I am, I'm stressed, right? My wife is the breadwinner. She's still working the lock desk, and she's making more money than I am, which it was a huge blow to my ego. Can't let that happen. I'm supposed to be the provider. And I'm stressed because I finally realize I'm over my skis. I don't know what I'm doing. You know, we talked earlier about asking for help. That's one of the toughest things for addicts and alcoholics to do. And I'm speaking from personal experience that it's really difficult to ask for help and to admit when we're wrong to another human being because we live with it 24/7 in our own minds. And, you know, 2017, my drinking is it's out of control at this point. I can no longer hide it. I'm a pickle. I'm a 24-hour pickle.
And is Quinn seeing all this?
She's seeing all this, but she's holding out hope, right? So she's holding out hope that I'm going to get my act together. And, you know, this whole time I'm going to therapy. And going to therapy while you're in active addiction or active alcoholism is like rearranging the furniture while the house is on fire. I mean, that's how absolutely insane it was. I would pay this guy $150 an hour to go lie to him for an hour to make me feel better. Oh, okay, I got the seal of approval.
I'm going to therapy.
Yeah, I'm going to therapy. See, hon, I'm doing all these things that I should be doing. And again, I'm still completely lacking self-awareness. I'm not doing that deep dive into really getting into what's the cause of all this. And it's all regret, right? The mistakes that I had made, the people I had ripped off earlier in my early 20s, the life choices I had made. And 2018, we went on a birthday trip to the coast in April. And we were there for 5 days, and I don't even remember how we got home. I don't remember going there. I don't remember anything about it. We get home, and at that point, I was drinking about a half a gallon of vodka a day. A day. That's a lot.
That's a lot of vodka.
Yeah. And Monday rolls around. I call in sick for work. Yeah, I'm doing a little bit more production at that point, but I'm still just a scared shell of a human being. You know, I don't want to go to work today. And so Monday, continue the cycle, and Tuesday morning, I had, and I'm gonna share some, but I'm gonna spare some of the gory details because they might be triggering to people who are listening to this. But that Tuesday morning, like a lawn sprinkler, vomit all over the bathroom. Walls couldn't make it into the toilet. Walls, ceilings, mirror, floor, everywhere. It was just uncontrollable. And you know, I had come down the stairs, and my shakes were so bad. I poured myself. You know, I just puked bile, and it was awful. I just made the worst mess, and I made it down to the stairs, and I poured myself another drink because that's going to make me feel better. That's what you do when you're an addict. I literally just made the biggest mess, and I thought I was going to die, and I went and I poured myself another drink because that's what I did. That's what I needed to help with the shakes. And I'm sitting there at the kitchen counter, and my wife's getting ready to go to work, and I was like, I need help.
Wow.
I hadn't asked for help. That was 2018. I hadn't asked for that kind of help since 2005. And so we started making phone calls, right? Rehab centers, Serenity Lane, Best Care. Like, what do we do? I can't stop drinking, right? I'm no longer getting drunk, and I can't stay sober. I'm at that point where I'm at the jumping off point that they talk about, where it'd just be easier if I was dead.
Wow.
And we get to this place called Turning Points Recovery. And, I find out then what a high bottom alcoholic is. I was a high bottom alcoholic because I still had 2 cars in the garage. I had a house. I had a wife. I had a family. I had money in the bank. I had all of this success that everybody saw on the outside, right? People were envying who I was and the life that I had. Yet here I was, just a shell of a human being, because I was an imposter on that success. So I get to Turning Point's recovery, and they're trying to find me a bed. They're like, you at least need detox. And I'm an important guy at this point, you guys.
Mhm.
I can't go to rehab. Like, my whole life will be over. I can't go to detox, right? I just want to find out how not to drink so much so this doesn't happen again.
Right.
How do I drink better? That's the insanity.
Oh my
Right?
gosh.
So they say, all right, well, we found you a bed. You can't check in until 5. Whatever you do, don't stop drinking.
You're like, well, I could do that. That's
don't stop drinking. Well, so we're sitting there in the parking lot, and I've got a bag packed. I am sobbing hysterically that this woman who loves me so much is watching me like this. I'm well over 300 pounds at this point. I will send you one day. I will send you the picture. And I don't know if you guys do anything on your YouTube, or if you want the before and sort of after picture.
Yeah.
I am unrecognizable. Unrecognizable. You will say that is not you. I am this bloated purple. I'm like a tomato that's about to pop. And I'm sobbing hysterically, and I just can't do this. And look, I'll be better. No, you really need to go in. And the people are convincing me to come in. So I'm shaking, and I've got my stuff. And don't you know who I am? This is a place for heroin addicts and junkies and alcoholics. I don't have a problem, right? I just drank too much. That's the lie that I was telling myself. I just drank a little too much. And, I got down the spiral, and I just need to clean it out of my system, and everything will be okay. And so I get in, they sit me down. I'm like, no idea what to expect, but they've got to do a physical evaluation on me. And they said, all right, we've got it from here. So my wife went home, and, we'll talk or whatever. But at this point, I completely black out, and I wake up on a hospital gurney. I had a grand mal seizure because of the alcohol withdrawals. And I wake up to what I thought was an angel at the time, was really the paramedic putting an IV to get fluids into me. And they had just absolutely pumped me full of benzos to get in there. And it is important because benzodiazepines are a part of my story. That's like a Xanax or a lorazepam or a Klonopin or Librium. Those I was taking every day because they were the magic hangover pill. I could drink myself silly, and then the next day when I was hungover,
Of course.
and I had anxiety, I'll just pop one of these and I'm great. Right? So I was on withdrawals from benzos and alcohol. So I'm in the ER. They're pumping all sorts of fluids into me, and I go into another grand mal seizure. And I become like combative, and I don't remember any of this.
Wow.
But they call my wife. It's now 11:30 at night, and they call my wife to drive 20 some odd miles in there because I'm demanding to see her. And it was a really, really tough 4 or 5 days of coming out of that fog. And I did not want to stay in rehab. There were people coming down off of heroin, banging on the walls, and I mean, just what I thought was the scum. I mean, this is the scum of the earth. I'm so much better than this. I have all these things. Don't you know who I am? I'm important. And, what are the people at work going to say about this? I was still so full of ego and full of myself. And they convinced me to stay. I didn't want to stay. So they would take us to, they'd pile all of us junkies and addicts and alcoholics into a bus, and we'd go to different meetings, different recovery-based meetings, right? And I'm sure you can figure out what the initials are on some of them. And I went to, I remember going to my first meeting, and I heard my story different, but I heard my story come out of someone else's mouth. And they talked about how they had everything, but the insanity of that first drink and how it made them feel, and that visceral reaction that you get. And I can't stop drinking. I can't get drunk, but I can't stop. And all of these things that I had thought, right? And the brushing my teeth in the morning and puking and gagging every day, and and vomiting in the middle of the night just to go pour another drink at 2 or 3 a.m. just to get you to sleep another few hours. Like all these things, like I was hearing my story, and I liked it. I liked it. And I thought, maybe there is hope. Maybe sober life, maybe sobriety is not that bad. I mean, I still couldn't imagine myself going to a barbecue or having a performance without a beer, or going golfing without a few cocktails, or going to a wedding or a funeral, right, without drinking. I couldn't imagine doing all of these major life events. Or if someone died, I had all of these yets and what ifs and not yets that hadn't happened.
Somebody hits a birdie.
Somebody hits a birdie, you got to have a birdie juice, all these different things, right? My life, and especially in this industry, there's a lot of mixers. There's a lot of events and alcohol.
Life is a special event.
Life is one big special event. So I stayed for 30 days, and my parents came to my graduation.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Right? Came to my graduation, and I hadn't had 30 days. I couldn't tell you, like, it was 15 years since I could even put a week together. And my parents came, and it was just, I think this is the way of life that I want. Now, that's not the end of my story. Relapse is part of my story, because again, you don't know who I am. I'm smarter. I can figure these things out. I'm Randy Vance. Right? I am Mr. Ego. In 4 or 5 months in a row of not drinking and going to meetings and doing the things, and I still, had my outpatient care that I did. I'm out golfing with a buddy, and it's hot. It's like 95 degrees, and we're playing, and he has a gin and tonic, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I think I can do this now. Right? I've done this.
You already beat it.
I've proven it's not a problem.
I've worked some program. Like, let's celebrate. So I don't know how much I drank on the golf course that day, but I came home and I was so excited to tell my wife that I could drink again. So again, insanity. If you're listening and you're a normal person, or a normie as we like to call you, this might not make sense, but this will let you in a little bit to understand the mind of an alcoholic or an addict. Right? So, babe, let's go get margaritas. So we go to a Mexican food restaurant right up the street from the house, and I'm explaining to her how I can drink again, and I'm a little buzzed because my liver had been cleansed. I hadn't had anything for 4 or 5 months, and it was hot out, but like everything's okay. I got this. Everything's fine. And the next thing I remember is waking up at midnight in the passenger seat of my truck, having peed my pants, sitting in my driveway. No clue how I got there. Apparently, before our food even arrived, I had maybe 1 sip of a margarita. I passed out in the restaurant. They couldn't revive me, and the restaurant staff had to carry me to the truck and put me in the truck, and my wife let me sit in the truck. And
wow,
you would think that would be enough. Not done yet. The next morning I come in, I'm ashamed, and I'm so sorry. I had all these excuses, and they made sense to me, and it was just all BS. And she's like, we're not going through this again. I can't handle it. I'm sorry, you know what? How about no hard liquor? Let's have a no hard liquor rule. Just beer and wine only. So did that for a little while. And I landed myself in the hospital a couple months later. She had gone on the road with her sister to see her dad in California, and it was a ticket for me to drink how I wanted to drink for those last few months. And she was gone, so I had 4 days to get good and heavy loaded. So I started drinking the way that I was right before
Previously.
the end, and my body wasn't ready for it, and ended up in the hospital right over Thanksgiving in 2018. And I remember this guy, one of the psychiatrists, he came and he pulled the curtain out and he was like, you can have as much recovery as you're willing to work for. And he tried to, come and talk to me about being an alcoholic. And I'm like, yeah, I've seen you at meetings. I don't, whatever. I got this. I still hadn't reached that.
Wow.
I still wasn't broken enough. So I put together a few more weeks, and then I was just like, you know what? I am an alcoholic. This is how I'm going out. I just accepted it. I'm going to drink, and if you don't like it, well, I'm going to do it anyways. Because I'm a drunk. I finally realized, yeah, I'm a drunk. And I like this and love this more than I love my wife, my family, my dogs, my friends, my job, everything. Alcohol was my great romance. And I couldn't wait to get enough of it in my system to just check out. Because it was a lot easier than actually confronting my own inner demons. So I was out there for a little bit longer. COVID was tough, right? I had managed to put together 4 or 5 months of sobriety, or phobriety, I call it, because I was still smoking weed and still using my benzos and doing anything to numb out and not feel any of that pain. And, we had started reading about the coronavirus, and when Kate Brown came on and announced that schools were canceled, this was March 12th of 2020,
Yep.
March 12th.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 4:00 in the morning, and I was living down south of town, and I drove to Redmond, and most of the shelves had already been picked clean, but I went to the super Walmart, and I loaded up 2 shopping carts full of anything I could get. Dog food, right? We had 4 dogs at the time, and needed dog food, water, all these things, and toilet paper. Got everything that I could, and hadn't been drinking, but I was like, this is the end of the world. This could be the end. This could be the apocalypse, right? I had seen Contagion. I had seen Outbreak. This was it. We're all going to die. Well, I'm going to die drunk. So I made it to the liquor store, and I filled up an entire cart, thousands of dollars worth of booze. And I went home, and I watched the death toll rise, and I drank. And I drank, and I drank, and I drank. And that's what I did for the first 2 months of COVID. Just completely alone. Everybody was dying. My wife, she's battled a lot of her own health problems, and I would drink at those, whether it was a surgery or a treatment that she was going through in her own personal recovery. It was a license for me to drink. And cancer is one of those things. It doesn't just kill the person, it's killing, right? It has direct effects on loved ones and family members. And for me, who was too much of a coward and too scared to think about the pain that she was going through, all I could think about was getting rid of my pain. And so when she was diagnosed with cancer and went through treatment, I drank. And after she had surgery and she had to have bed rest for weeks at a time, I drank. And I drank and I drank and I drank. And that's all I did for years. And coming out of the fog of COVID, because so many people isolated, so many people, I don't want to say developed alcoholism or addiction, but a lot of us were scared. And especially for a coward like me who lived in fear, this was my moment. This was my piece de resistance. I could finally drink and die in my own house like a man. And as cynical and as sinister as that sounds, that was the thought in my head. I remember at one point and this is what really, really scared me and scared me back into complete and total sobriety, was it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and all we had in the house to drink was champagne, and it was warm, but I needed some. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I popped the bottle, and I drank the entire bottle in a couple of minutes of warm champagne. And I remember sitting to myself, standing in my living room in the dark, holding a bottle of champagne, going, this is fun. This is the life. Yeah, we're having fun. And it gave me chills. It scared me to the point where I was just like, who am I? What was that? It was like the bag falling in the room earlier. I have goosebumps talking about it now. It was so, I had such a visceral reaction. Who was there? Am I literally losing my mind? Am I going crazy? Who just said that? Aren't we having fun? This is the life. And I'm just like, nope. And my sobriety date is March 20th, 2023. And it has been the best year and a half of my life. I've been able to give up benzos. I've been able to get off all medication. I've been able to quit smoking cigarettes. I've been able to quit anything that alters and changes how I feel. And therapy actually works when you're honest with your therapist. And you can dive in and you can do all these amazing and great things. And I look back at it, and I had to create insulation. And we'll talk business in a moment, but I think it's really important for people to understand that you have to, in order for a person to recover, number one, they've got to have the willingness. They've got to want to recover, right? And some people, relapse is not a part of their story, and that's great. But for some people who have battled drug addiction and alcoholism the way that I have, where we get too smart for the program, or we get too smart, we try to break things apart. I had to just dive into my innermost self. I absolutely had to reach that breaking point, and that moment in the living room at 2 o'clock in the morning with a whisper in my ear from, I don't know what, I felt like maybe I was going schizophrenic. I had to have that moment, and I had to have all of this data, right, of failed attempts at trying to drink again, trying to do it again. And I had to build insulation around me. I had to say goodbye to certain friends, right? And towards the end there, let's be honest, I wasn't getting invited to those parties. Nobody wanted another Irish goodbye from Randy, and nobody really wanted to come over to my parties because I'd always end up passed out on the bed at 8:30 at night when the party is going till 11. And I built recovery around me. I told on myself, right? I told my friends, no thanks. I'm not drinking, is I don't drink. I've heard some funny things said from people in recovery, and yeah, no alcohol for me. If I have any booze, I break out in handcuffs. Jails, institutions, and death is what I was on my way to. And I had been to an institution, and I had been to jail, and the only thing that was left waiting for me was death.
What do you think? The juxtaposition of, isn't life great, holding a warm bottle of champagne, which if champagne was my only option, I never would have started drinking in the first place. It just would have never worked. But you're holding a warm, probably nearly empty bottle of champagne, and you're saying, isn't life great? And then there's something in you that says, no.
Yeah.
And you've been there before.
Yeah.
The pain and suffering of alcohol has been there before. So what was it about that moment, that juxtaposition that just finally, was it all that past? What was it?
The definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And I had been doing all of these just things. I had some success, right? I had built this empire. I had become the top producing loan officer in my region by a long shot. I had a lot of success, and I had the ego to go with it, right? I think it was just, it's that mental pain. It's like the volume's up at 11, even though I'm not saying anything in my mind, the volume's just up to 11 and I just want to shut it off. And for a time, alcohol worked and drugs worked to do that. And there's always something deeper in an addict's head of what's really going on, right? I first drank because I liked the effect. And then when I realized that having a little bit more would shut the voices off, but it only did that until they came back. So, ultimately, I have to let everyone know in my life, look, I'm in recovery. And I was talking to Ken earlier this morning. This is actually National Recovery Awareness Month. And that's kind of why I sort of hijacked your podcast to talk about recovery.
I love it. Yeah.
Is because I know what it's like to suffer through that. And I'm a high bottom alcoholic because I didn't lose anything, but I very well could have. I lost my mind, right? I lost my dignity. I made poor decisions.
And who knows how close you were to losing all other kinds of significant things, your
Right.
marriage,
my liver,
Yeah.
my kidneys, my heart, all of those things.
I don't want to miss out on the opportunity of talking about your mortgage career, but I think this is probably, for this particular episode, a great place to transition and have you back to talk about the mortgage career. We're 90 minutes into this, and it seems like it was 40 minutes. I mean,
Wow.
and I think the two are probably two good separate conversations.
They are. Yeah.
And this is just too powerful to transition into something as relatively unimportant as a mortgage career. And though yours has been stellar and you've accomplished great things, I think this is a story on its own for today.
I want to ask you something, because then we can cut this later if this is me sounding way too crazy. But I keep spinning on that moment for you, because you said it was like it wasn't you. It was we are having fun. Isn't this? That had to scare the hell out of you, because, and the thing that keeps going over in my head is the devil got too loud. Like the devil got too brazen, because up until then you were fooled into thinking, oh, this is who I am. This is me. And like you were believing all these lies.
Yeah.
And then that moment, it got a little bit too, you were able to almost put it outside of yourself and go, wait a second, I've been operating under somebody's mission that isn't mine. And it's that you almost, I mean, you saw the devil.
Absolutely. And that is who I feel was with me that night. Whether it was my own personal devil or the devil himself, that's how real it felt to me
I've got
that
the
night.
chills right now too. Like that's,
Yeah.
You could see the lie finally.
Yeah.
and it was vocal. Like it was there.
It was
for you.
audible. It was audible.
It was your voice.
Uh-huh.
And for a guy who likes competing, you like competing on your own. And if somebody else is doing that, this almost feels like a competition, you against who was in the room with you that night for the rest of your life, for your life.
The powerful thing about the things that are shared on Lessons from Last Time, Ken shared this. He talked about, just going in to get a necessary and needed colonoscopy one time. And then he tells a story about how a woman reached out to him because he talked about it on the podcast and was willing to talk about something as awkward as getting a colonoscopy. She went in and got one and found precancerous cells and got treatment for it and probably avoided and there's been so many stories from Matt Ellerding sharing his opioid addiction and what happened as a result of getting punched by his trainer at the gym while working out and happened to break a couple ribs accidentally, anecdotally, and then because of that developing an opioid addiction. Boy, that's a hard one to say. There is so much in what you've said today that is potentially powerfully affecting somebody who's walking their own path, I can't say a similar path because we're all so different and the path branches in so many different ways. But if somebody wanted to reach out to you and just touch base with you, first of all, if you're okay with that, second of all, how would they go about doing that?
I would say email's probably the best way. My phone, even though I'm on my phone all the time, oftentimes I can't take the call right away.
Sure.
But I think email is a good, it's a good introduction because listen, addiction carries with it a certain amount of shame.
Yeah.
but curiosity is welcome.
Yeah.
So I would say if you email me at randy@bossmortgage.com, I'll make sure that I get back to
And
it.
we'll post that graphic in the podcast when it broadcasts.
I think if I have one lesson, right, it's that it's a slippery slope. It's really easy to get there. And if you feel like you have a problem with drugs or alcohol, that you should talk to someone about it. I do know there are programs out there that have absolutely saved my life. And I'm very thankful to my parents. We talked about my parents growing up in a very strict household. I am very thankful for that foundation that I had as a child. While I resented it early on in adulthood, I look back at it now and I sort of feel if I didn't have that foundation, I very well could be the guy under the bridge with the brown paper bag, because the truth is alcoholics and addicts, they wear suits and drive Maseratis too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You had a compass, and I was thinking about it when you were talking about your journey. When you finally got to that mortgage company where they're doing things right, and you loved it, and how could you recognize that they were doing things right? Well, partially because you've been where they were doing things decidedly wrong, but also because you had a compass. And even as off course as your life got, you still had a compass heading in your life that kept bringing you back to a true north, and you eventually walked in that direction. But I think that's something to celebrate about the way you were raised. Not that it's the ideal or perfect way to raise children. I'm not endorsing that, but it brought you back to true north because you had a foundation.
I'm the luckiest guy alive.
You can't keep saying that.
I am.
He said that like 50 times yesterday.
Every day. I mean, my golf game didn't prove it. I played horribly yesterday. But gosh, life smell better. Things taste better. Life is exciting again. The company is doing great, amazing things. I pop up out of bed every day like a Pop-Tart. And I love my wife.
She deserves a medal.
We developed a love. It wasn't that, dynamic romance right out of the gate, but like she has been through me and my absolute worst.
Yeah, and still with you.
And still with me. And I'm just telling you, man, I am the luckiest guy alive. My dogs now are happy to see me when I get home.
Oh, even they were kind of like, oh gosh.
They don't hide from me. What's Dad going to do next?
Well, I can offer you this encouragement. If you want to feel better about your golf game, don't play with Ken. He plays like 9 or 10 days a week.
I get a feeling we're about the same golfer, but he fell apart on a couple holes yesterday.
All but 3.
It's always a pleasure for me when I get into studio with Ken with somebody that he knows well that I don't. And I think it's true vice versa too.
Oh, yeah.
It's because I get exposed to this story that I can't be prepared for.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know you. I haven't talked to you for 5 minutes other than walking in the door today. So I really appreciate you being here. Really, really appreciate your willingness to be vulnerable and transparent about your story.
I've got one more question for you.
Yes.
Last question on the podcast. If you were to walk up on 10-year-old Randy Vance, he's out on the playground hanging out, and you get to give him one piece of advice based on everything you've been through, everything you know now. What's the one piece of advice you would give to that little kid?
This one's really easy. You don't actually know it all.
Even at 10.
Be curious.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I love it. Randy, thank you for sharing, man. This is going to be a very powerful podcast for a lot of people. And I just appreciate you being open to share.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me on, you guys.
No, thanks for coming in.